Okay, welcome to the CoC training this morning. We are, again, really excited and happy to have you here. I'm going to have our expert and generous presenters, Dimitri, introduce himself in a moment. But first, I want to let you know who I am and who we are. Uh, my name is Eli. I work with Home Base. We're a nonprofit that works with the County Office of Supportive Housing to provide, among other things, a series of CoC trainings. This training is one that we did once before with Dimitri in person, and today he's transferring that excellent training to the Zoom format for us, which is fantastic. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are going to be recording this, and the recording will be available. You're all muted, and again, we ask that you not unmute yourself. I'm going to show you how to ask to be unmuted and also how to participate with questions and conversation in the chat box. I'm going to describe to you how. So when you're looking at your Zoom screen, you should see a control bar, usually at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and it has things like share participants, it says chat, there's a little chat icon. If you click on that chat icon, it'll pop up with a chat box, and you can see the chat that has already happened in the room. And you can also send a message to the room. I can see a lot of you have already said good morning. It is a beautiful Friday. It's good to see you all, especially those of you who I haven't been able to see in person in a while. So that chat box is a really good place to ask questions and to give comments. So if Dimitri's asked a question and you want to respond, or if you have a question at any time during the presentation, just go ahead and type it in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that, and so I can sort of let Dimitri know when you'll have a question and read that out for you. Another way for you to participate with questions or comments is by raising your hand to talk. To do that, you'll find the participants icon in that control bar. If you click participants, that should give you a list of everybody who's in the room. And at the sort of the bottom left of that list, you'll see a little icon that says raise hand. Right, so you go to participants, and then there'll be an icon that says raise hand. If you raise your hand, that lets us know that you have something you want to say out loud with your human mouth on your microphone. And my colleague, Monica, will let Dimitri know we have a comment and will unmute you. And that's how we're going to manage the participation. Again, it's a little different in Zoom, but we do really encourage you to participate because this is a good one to engage in. So I mentioned Monica is going to be helping monitor the participants list. We also have my colleague and excellent teammate, Nicole, who is going to be helping if you have tech issues. You can reach out directly to Nicole or just chat everyone in the chat box with those. And with that, I'm going to pass to Dimitri to introduce himself and kick off the training.
I'm going to record too, if that's okay. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. I feel honored and glad to be here. So my name is Dimitri Wolfovich. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Just a quick little background about me. So I've been with the Santa Clara County for a couple years. I work with the Employee Assistance Program. So I actually provide therapy for Santa Clara County employees, and that's kind of my part-time job. I have a private practice, and I'm also a supervisor. I train psychotherapy interns that are just out of grad school in sort of an experiential, holistic Gestalt model of therapy. And that's just a little bit of background about me. But what I do here at EAP is I provide these trainings to county employees and county departments, and this is sort of an inadvertent way of doing it this way to your department for the first time, I think, on Zoom that I'll be doing it. So this training is about compassion fatigue. But before I kind of get into the topic, well, I guess my orientation with this whole thing is I'm naturally, so I'm trained in a somatic approach, which is kind of like looking at the way that the body interacts with mental health issues and how it's kind of like it's sort of, they call it the stress disease model, which basically says that, stress can have an impact on your body. And I'll go more into that, but I do specialize in sort of somatic and body oriented way of mental health. And that's pretty much it as an introduction. um, I guess I'll go ahead and get started with the slides. All right. So, all right, so everybody's good with this?
Yes, we're good.
All right. So, like Eli said, I'll be open to questions as we go along. I'd love to um, make sure this is relevant for everybody, so feel free to inquire. Um, so, oops. Oh, like that. Okay. So I'm assuming that the participants are, at least some of which are Santa Clara County employees. I'm not going to go into this too much, but if you are a Santa Clara County employee, just so you know, you can come and see me or any of our 5 other staff here at EAP. You get 7 sessions. And it's not part of the health insurance, and it's confidential. It's really a good resource for getting support. Um, so yeah, here's information. You will have the slides, so you can contact us and schedule an appointment. We have me and other providers here. All right, so I'm going to get started. And I don't know if anybody has any questions about EAP, but I don't want to spend too much time on it because I want to make sure we have the training covered. All right, so let's get started. So, like I said, so I'm going to be talking about secondary trauma and burnout. And I think especially during this time of the whole COVID-19 period, I think it's really beneficial for everybody to take a look at this and how you're doing with your capacity working with the community, and really how to do that in a way that's sustainable. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. All right, so the first slide is I really like this one. It says, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. uh, Buddha, it's probably arbitrary whether Buddha actually said that, but who knows? But nonetheless, I think that it's really important to really consider that, sort of malice and judgment going inside is just as bad as it is going outside. So if you're judgmental towards yourself, that's not any better than being judgmental towards others. Some people think, well, as long as I'm nice to other people and I can be mean to myself in private, that's somehow noble. It isn't. Practicing compassion towards yourself is a really important thing. So I just like to start off with that. I usually, when I do this live training, I like to draw on the board. It really helps to understand what in psychology and Gestalt they call the inner Gestalt. And basically what it is if you can imagine like maybe like 6 circles kind of in a circular fashion. And you can think about it this way. So like within each of us, we have a community of parts. So, I like to call it the psychic biome. If you think, like the biome is something that you have like a community of in your gut. So like you have bacteria in your gut, it's called a biome. Well, it's like that also in the mind or in the psyche, is that there is a community within you. So there's different parts. You have the sad part, you have the happy part, you have your internalized mom, you have the scared part, you have all these different parts, and of course you have the executive function, which is like your main I or whatever. And so if you think about it, within us, you have a sort of a congressional community that is always kind of making decisions and feeling certain ways. And what happens is when a person has two parts or more than two parts that don't agree, you have internal conflict when you're going against yourself. One part of you feels a certain way, another part feels a different way, and that is what causes inner conflict, distress, anxiety, depression. And so you have, discord within. And so, and that's what that is when you judge yourself, when you hate yourself, when you feel shame towards yourself, all those things. And so, in a nutshell, what therapy is about making those parts agree that don't agree within you. And so, and that's what inner peace is. I mean, inner peace is a very like fluffy term, but fundamentally, it's when your inner community, your internal parts are in union and they work in accordance, and so that you have a whole self, and you don't have parts of you that are splitting off or fighting each other. So you can kind of look at it this way. So compassion within, it has to do with agreeing, understanding yourself, and not going at odds, not going against yourself, and being on your own side, basically. So that's kind of to explain that piece. All right. Like I said, any questions, just pop in. Okay. So moving forward, so first, this slide is about just kind of explaining the what is called compassionate satisfaction. It's basically the the wholesome and positive side of the helping profession. And so people may feel pleasure and satisfaction derived from working in helping or caregiving roles, um, providing care, feeling good about giving. And so there's a certain identity that comes with that we all feel when working, when doing these things. You connect to your community. You feel like you're part of the remedy. You're participating in a way that is beneficial, and you have this sort of existential identity of like, wow, I'm really helping, and that's really amazing. That's what it's all about. Also working with your colleagues in collaboration, feeling a sense of unity, feeling like you're part of something. And like I said, this belief that I am a giver, I'm a healer, and this altruism is really what we fundamentally are striving for and feed from. And not to put other professions down, but I do want to point out that I think our society, there's a lack of meaning, and I think that people oftentimes have depression and other symptoms from working in jobs where they don't have a sense of meaning, or maybe it's sometimes negative, like maybe your job is actually contributing to harm, whether it's with something, a product that isn't really healthy, and so people do struggle, and people go to therapy for that, to try to figure out why they're not happy. Well, and it has to do with their identity. And so I think that what I'm trying to say is that people, if you're working with the helping profession, there's a lot of great benefits to it, like particularly with altruism. And it's okay. What I tell people is that it's okay to be selfish about it, that you're doing it, it's self-serving, that you like to feel good about yourself, and you like to feel like you're a good person, and that's great. You don't need to don't try to fool yourself into thinking that that's not why you're doing it. And so, yeah, and do it because it makes you feel good, and don't try to save the world. This is a precursor to burnout, and we're going to talk more about it later. But you can't worry too much about the outcome of your service, or how much of an impact you're having. You can definitely track your immediate cases and see the benefit, but there is always going to be suffering in this world, and there's always going to be homelessness and trauma and pain, and you can't trying to imagine to make everything up and not down, and destroy all the darkness and keep only the light is, it's a meaningless task. So I would say focus on just doing what you love to do, and staying with that. All right. So all right, so compassion fatigue. So when helping others hurts us. So this is where we get into some of the downfalls of this altruism that we want to look out for, so that we can continue to feel good about what we're doing and really streamline ourselves into being excited about helping in the community, and actually benefiting from it. So that's that. Let me just start here. So, okay. So burnout. This is just to kind of defining the terms, really. So what is burnout? So burnout is, it's helping to the point where you feel kind of self-destructive and hopeless. You really don't, you get the sense that it's not effective what you're doing, and it's not really helping. You maybe feel exhausted, and you may feel like you're overextending yourself, like you're trying too hard. And you may also feel like you're going through the motions, and kind of just doing everything perfunctory, like, okay, just, getting through, doing your notes, where it's just almost like a conveyor belt. And sometimes even you may generate resentment towards your clients and the staff that you're working with, kind of like, ugh, I'm tired of this, I'm sick of this, work sucks. And burnout, it usually has sort of a gradual onset and may come and go. It kind of creeps up on you, like with time. Like, I'm not going to get into solutions yet, but this is, obviously, not taking enough time off, not, regenerating, and this can happen over time, where you kind of start to feel really out of it. And then we'll talk about later is also that, you have somatic symptoms of burnout, and it shows up as headaches, mood swings, or fatigue. There are somatic symptoms to everything, including secondary trauma, but this is, with burnout, you do start to get these somatic symptoms. All right. So that's burnout. And then we have secondary trauma, stress, which is, I'm kind of differentiating now at this point between burnout and secondary trauma. So secondary trauma is a little bit different. How it shows up is maybe feeling of being frightened. You also a sense of kind of a preoccupation, of the people, of your client, thinking about them a lot. Not just, I know it happens, you kind of, oh, did I do the right thing, or are they going to be okay? But more so, like, where it continues off into the night. Feeling trapped, intrusive thoughts about your clients, and feeling really kind of on edge and hypervigilant. What I like to do here is, at this point of the slide, I like to explain hypervigilance. I don't know, you probably have, everyone probably has heard this term, but I just like to kind of explain it a little bit. Maybe it'll help. At least how I see it. How I see hypervigilance is really like, basically, like, I had a client who she came in and she said that she's been recovering from, she works in like some industrial area, where, like, a factory or something, and she said that a metal door fell on her head, and so after that, she went to the hospital and she recovered, and got out of the hospital, took some medical leave. But anyways, eventually she came back to work. Okay, and what happened was, after she came back to work, she noticed that when she was at work, she could hear way down the hall. Like she could hear like things that conversations in the bathroom and things like that. And what does that say? I'm wondering if maybe we can help. We can get some participation, maybe chat in, or what do you guys think that that says about, what does that mean? Like if a person went through some kind of physical accident and then their hearing increases.
Yeah, so we have some responses in the chat, maybe looking for threats on the horizon from
Right,
Daniel.
right, right, right. Yeah, exactly. Um, so anybody else comment, or that's it?
Not yet. Anybody else have thoughts?
So
Yeah, so we've got Jose saying PTSD, feeling it's going to happen again.
right, right,
So give that general
exactly.
fear.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So if you think about it from a nervous system perspective, of course, the nervous system is going to try to prevent further accidents, right? So if a metal door fell on your head, your nervous system is going to say, you know what? I'm going to make sure this never happens again. And how to do that? Well, since you got hurt, you must have not been looking out. And so it's actually quite genius if you think about it from a holistic perspective, that your senses increase to avoid further trauma. And so it actually is actually a very functional and evolutionary component. Hypervigilance. It is actually a protective mechanism that the nervous system has. So this lady started to hear from down the hall as a way to preserve, like a self-preservation, really. Um, and so what I like to do is right off the bat is just to remind you that symptoms are all actually there to help you. Now, the only problem with hypervigilance and other symptoms is that it's uncomfortable to live like that. If you have hypervigilance, somebody will close the door and you'll like flinch because it'll be that much more apparent that the noise that's made from closing the door. And so you kind of live on edge because you're always inundated with these precursors to danger. So on the one hand, it is your own nervous system trying to help you. So you have to start there and kind of acknowledge that, oh, okay, wow, so like this is happening because I'm trying to protect myself. But on the other hand, it is something to look at because it's difficult to maintain. It's exhausting to live like that, to live in a state of hypervigilance. And so obviously getting help from a therapist that can help you soothe and really dismantle this nervous system response so that the safety is felt again, and that you no longer feel the need to be so hypervigilant. But I just wanted to point that out because some people think that hypervigilance is some kind of like perturbed brain chemistry or something like that. It has nothing to do with anything. No, it's actually a very intelligent response to trauma. Um, all right, does that make sense?
Yeah, and we had Martha and Victoria noting that's sort of becoming more aware of your surroundings or just becoming hypersensitive to exactly what you were describing.
Right, right. Yeah, and and this kind of stress response, it can get into your body. You um, may have hypervigilance is only one of the it's or like for instance hearing or something like that is one of the ways, but it can also go in a different fashion where it can show up as stress or tension, headaches, you name it. Every type of bodily experience you can have, dizziness, heartburn. But the point is, the body will naturally find a way to sort of demonstrate that something is off, um, and that's what it does. And so and the next point is the inability to separate one's private life of helping. So that is becomes, so what happens is, with this secondary trauma stress, is that you over identify, you become so identified with this person that you're not really discerning your life from the other person, and that's where it becomes really difficult to cope. And some people will actually get numb, because that is another way to, again, it's a function of self-preservation. So feeling depersonalizing and feeling numb is that you sort of like your nervous system saying, I can't care anymore, this is too much for me, I'm gonna like feel numb, I'm just gonna kind of check out. And again, that's another way that the nervous system copes with secondary trauma. um, and then, of course, irrational fears. You may become suspicious of other people around you, or it starts to become a focus point, kind of like hypervigilance, but more cognitively. Um, and with secondary trauma stress, it's not like burnout in the sense that it is not building up. It is actually can come out of nowhere. It's not necessarily out of nowhere, but it's sudden. But just to point out with this secondary trauma stress, and this is a lot for all, it is especially more important for people who are therapists and mental health providers, but and it goes down the line with everybody that works, with any helping profession, nurses and case managers and everything. But what's really important to understand is that you will get more so triggered about things, about clients, if you have a relevant history with that particular process. So if I myself was sexually abused, or if I myself was physically abused, or if I witnessed something really horrid myself, even if it's 20 years ago, talking to a client who tells me something that is kind of resonant of that situation, that will trigger me a lot more than if I had not had that personal experience myself. So what that speaks to is, with regards to sudden onset, if you are triggered by something, it is likely that there is a part of you that is somehow reminded of something. And it's an opportunity to take a look at that, because you wouldn't be so triggered naturally if it wasn't already within you on some level. And if it is triggered to the point where it's starting to bother you and interfere with your life, it is really a great opportunity to go and see a therapist about it, and really heal what hasn't already been healed with regards to that trigger or trauma. So I would not see it as something negative, but I would see it as, oh well, look, maybe there's still something down there that I can heal and discover and make well. But just to point out that things, you don't get triggered unless there's something of yours as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't be as triggered by something of that sort. Does that make sense? Let's see, is there a way for me to see the chat while in share screen, or no?
Yeah, definitely. If you click the chat, if you find your control bar, if you click the chat icon, it'll pop it up. I'm not sure where the Zoom control bar will be for you.
At the top, I have remote control, annotate, pause, participants.
Maybe more?
Okay. No, I don't see it there. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. I don't think I can see chat from here.
Mm,
All right. Well, yeah,
yeah,
let me know if anybody it chats in.
will do.
So that's that. So that's secondary trauma. So we have burnout and secondary trauma. Those are the two categories of compassion fatigue umbrella. Um, and I will move forward from here. Okay. So um, so now I'm going to go into the kind of a little bit more in depth about trauma in the body. This is an entire, like, you can go to school and do like a whole master's in trauma and somatic psychology. It's a very complex, um, it's a very complex field of study, and it's becoming more and more popular. It's actually becoming more so popular because of this trauma informed um, paradigm that is entering in mental health, even on the most like mainstream, level, like with regards to just, county and other big institutions. We're moving away from this medical symptom pathological model and more into trauma informed paradigm, and trauma informed paradigm is naturally more holistic. I mean, it is, whether it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's alcoholism or OCD or personality disorders or anything, you name it. There's always some kind of traumatic early childhood or issue, and that has to do with how a person internalized those experiences in the body. And so I think naturally we're moving into this more trauma in the body paradigm. So let me just give you a little bit about it. I'm sure some of you have already been familiarized with it a little at least, but um, all right. So every event is recorded physiologically. We call it somatically. So just by the way, just to define the term, soma means body in Greek. And so somatic meaning body oriented. So every event is recorded physiologically, and particularly stressful events create holding patterns in the body. So if you think about it, if you get into a car accident, you're going to brace to survive it, and that bracing is you're going to tense your muscles and kind of tighten up, even in a roller coaster or whatever. So with stressful and traumatic events, after you survive it, your body is going to remember that. And usually these holding patterns of tension will be pathways for stress to continue in that fashion. So it'll be almost like you walked in the snow and there'll be a little path, and then those dendrites will continue in that fashion. So anytime you're stressed out, it will likely go in that same fashion. So you'll find wherever that tension started, you will find tension there more and more. Um, so that's what a holding pattern is. Holding patterns are ways the body tries to protect itself through muscular armor and bracing. So
Dimitri,
you're the holding, yeah,
oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. We actually have a question about the what you were talking about before.
yeah.
So if a person, Anna asked, is used to helping people in a situation where you're unable to, when you're unable to help others and you're used to being able to help, is that a type of trigger? Because having to tell clients no, unfortunately, we're unable to provide you with a certain type of assistance. Something like that can be really hard.
Uh, Sorry, could you reframe the question? What was the question?
Sounds like so. I think Anna's asking if you're used to helping people, and then you're in a situation where somebody really needs something, and you're not able to provide it because you don't have access to that resource, or for whatever reason. Can that also in itself be a type of trigger, like having to tell a client, no, unfortunately, we can't do that?
Yeah, that is definitely a trigger. And I remember that's a really good question because I don't really get that question a lot, but it definitely has a lot to do with um, boundary setting. And then sometimes, you have to set boundaries not because of your own intention, but because of the, like, whatever institution you're working for has certain limitations. But I think I'll explain more about that later, but I think that's a really great question with regards to having to um, forfeit your kind of your need to help, and there could be a sense for the provider, there can be a sense of almost like loss, or you have to kind of like um, grieve that you can't help, and also wonder what will happen to them. And so there is a certain sense of reaction on your end of maybe sadness or um, fear about what will happen to the other person. I think that could certainly be triggering. Um, I think I'm going to get into more about how to deal with that in the later slides with regards to self-determination and sort of ownership of your feelings, because um, it's actually really healthy. I'll just give you for now this response. It is really healthy to give up control um, over other people. I think that you know that's what we call self-determination. We have to honor the fact that each person has their own life path, and that we really cannot save everybody. And there's a certain kind of unlearning. Like when I went to grad school, they told us, like, if you think you're a healer, like throw that in the garbage. Because like basically you too identified with helping, it's not healthy. You have to learn to go with it, go with the waves of life, and sometimes it's just not possible, and you have to kind of accept that. And so I'll answer your question much more effectively with the next slides that are coming, but that's all I have for now. Okay. um but yeah, that's a good question. So does that help? Does that help, or anything else should I say for now, and before I move on?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Give Anna a
Okay.
second. Okay. Yeah, so, and just as a reminder, if you have a question, thank you so much, Anna, for that question. If you have a question, to find the chat box, there should be a Zoom control bar somewhere on your screen, and there will be an icon that says chat. And if you just click that, there'll be a chat box that pops up that you can type in. And anytime, go ahead and do that. I'll make sure we let Dimitri know there's a question and read it out. Yeah, and we have a response actually that from Eloisa, that maybe even just giving yourself the label of healer is just too much pressure to put on yourself, which is
Right.
that
Right.
makes sense.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. Sometimes I do this exact training, and I do this for the VMC internal the residents, the medical doctors. And I tell them, I'm like, sometimes it can be quite limiting and um, confining to really get stuck on your doctor title, because um, when you're a doctor, there's a certain sense of, you get kind of boxed in, because there's like a savior complex. Like you're like, first of all, you're like academically at the top, like there's you're a medical doctor, there's nothing higher institutionally than an MD. And so you have this sort of academic title, you have this physiological, um, you're able to save people and stuff like that. And so that really starts to get into your head, and it can really limit you as a person, because everybody is so much more dynamic. There's so much more to you than just a job title. And so what I tell some of these medical doctors is that move away from this conceptual reality of like who you think you are, and really move into more of your body, and live more spontaneously, and listen to your body, because sometimes you just need a break, and you can't get stuck on your title. So, oh, I found the
Actually,
chat actually.
oh, awesome. Yeah, there's one more comment. Sometimes I wonder if I don't care enough when a client's distressed that I can't deliver what they want. Balancing act between caring too much and too little.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Um, I think that each of us has to find our own little sweet spot that is just right. I think that I don't want to go all into any one direction and be like this, pro limit setting person. I think that there's room for limits, but I think that there's also room for having a heart and not being afraid to care about people. But the way to, and I'll explain this, I'll get into this more, but the way to, as a matter of fact, this is a good slide for it. So the way to know how your level of participation in supporting the community is not conceptual. Okay, you will get stuck with trying to figure it out cognitively, how whether or not you're participating enough or too little. You will never figure it out cognitively. The best way to know whether or not you're participating and too much or too little is to trust your body. Your body will tell you if you're in a state of ease and wellness and you can deliver and you feel like you're supportive. If you're starting to develop symptoms like we just talked about, burnout, secondary trauma, these are signs that your body is no longer digging it. Your body is no longer in the state. So it's the best way to know, the best way to find the sweet spot. It's kind of like, do you guys remember when you were little kids and you played this game where you had to put a bandana on your eyes and then you had to find an object and your friend would be like warmer, colder, and you had to go around the room? You have to do that with yourself. It's not it's you, and when the metaphor is, you have to sense into yourself and you have to find out what feels right. And the way to know is by stress. If you're feeling uneasy, tense, and stressed out, we all know this feeling. And if that's what you're feeling, that it's a sign that you need to back off. um, so yeah. And so holding patterns, again, holding patterns are ways the body tries to protect itself through muscular armor. And listening to the body mindfully can lead to healing and the release of holding patterns. Mindfulness meditation, body scan, and any other body oriented, um, like yoga or any other activities where you're really paying attention to your body, is really essential in the helping profession. I don't think I would be able to survive, honestly, being a therapist if I didn't have body oriented activities like yoga, Tai Chi, even walking or hiking. I mean, the only thing is just to keep in mind with body oriented activities, there's activities that are not mindful. Like if you're doing very rigorous, like body weight stuff, you know, you're not really attending. You're kind of like getting. So don't confuse the two. I think what I'm talking about is mindful attending, which maybe even getting a massage, something like that, where you're really paying close attention to tension.
Yeah. And Dimitri, I
Um,
don't want to stop you from moving forward, but we had one last reflection on the healer label and sort of self-perception. And it was
yeah,
saying that she wouldn't label herself a healer, but as a child growing up, she got used to helping her parents solve problems. So she sort of sees that as more of a role that she learned as a child, helping solve problems.
yeah, I like that. My request. Oh, this is Anna, right? Um, so uh, one of the greatest wisdoms that I've ever heard is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Um, everything that I tell you, think for yourself and find your own truth. And maybe being a healer and a helper in some capacity is really healthy for you. I would also invite you to consider that there's a lot of unlearning that happens when we grow up. Not everything that our parents teach us is good for us, and society. And you have all sorts of beliefs, like about money, about race, about all sorts of stuff, class, health, you know we actually get a lot of how we experience life through the way that we internalize our parents, the way they argue, the way that this, the way they that, the way they deal with problems. Um, so for you, for Anna, I would say, um, take the best from this and see how much of it's useful to continue to be a helper, but also discern and see if, how much of it is beneficial for you. And that's why it's sort of this journey of self-discovery, doing your own you know um, introspection, and really looking at, am I helping, for what reason? What is my deeper intention? Am I trying to like please people or placate people, and am I abandoning myself in that process? Am I just trying to like escape my own process and escape, and trying to help? Or does the helping come from a real earnest and sincere place, like, hey, I'm really feeling well and I have enough wellness in me to share with other people and really contribute. So it's about where it comes from. Helping is not a bad idea, but you have to be introspective and examine yourself to see like where does that come from, and is that kind of a place of earnesty, or is that a place of placation, or pleasing, or codependence type of thing. So that's what I would invite you to discern. And I could not know that based on just who you are. You'd have to really get to know somebody to figure that out, or get to know yourself. Does that make sense? So nice.
Yeah, it does.
All right. Yeah, I got the chat finally. So all right, cool. I'll be on the lookout for questions here. Um, so okay, and then so listening to the body, okay, so then you have micromotor movements and general postures say a lot about a person, because it's literally a psychosomatic translation. So this is something that I tell my interns that I supervise. It goes against the paradigm of where the institutions, you have in a given program, whether it's mental health or community um, program, you have all this paperwork, you have all this assessments, you have them fill out all these papers and this and that and all these indexes. What I tell my students though is that, when a person walks in, every aspect of the session is an assessment. The way that they're walking, their posture, the way that they're sitting, the way that they're talking, the way how they're moving their arms. Do they have their arms clasped like this when they're talking? Are they open? Do they have, are their legs open in disrespect? Are they sitting hunched over? And so don't forget that micromotor movements are a form of communication. So a person can be like, yeah, I'm feeling really happy right now, and it's kind of like, well, just because they said that doesn't mean that they're happy. There's a lot of other information that you could pick up on. And this goes for your clients and for you. You may want to believe something about yourself, but if you actually pay attention to your way that you are, you might find out that it's different. And so more emphasis, I'm inviting you to put more emphasis on the body and micromotor movements, and really discovering what is really happening experientially. I think that we in the West have been taught to think that like it's all about talk and speech, but it's like the rappers say, talk is cheap. And it really is. It is talk. Speech is just one component of communication, and being, for that matter. There's a lot more going on, and just my invitation is just to pay attention to that, for your clients and for yourself. Sometimes when in therapy training, what we would do is we would have people watch sitcoms and put the thing on mute, so that they can actually look at the conversations without any voice, and try to figure out what's going on based on their posturing and everything. And that's actually a really good exercise when dealing with people. We have a comment here. Yes, I agree with the participants. It says she was taught to help her parents. This is my case also. It's ingrained. I feel it's automatic. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it's really hard to tell about that piece, whether it is healthy or unhealthy. But I will say this: I don't know if any of you have children. I have two kids myself, but from what I understand from the love and logic model, which is like a trusted parenting paradigm, what they say is that kids should only be required to do things that is their responsibility. For instance, their laundry, their dishes, their room, their own personal responsibilities. When kids are made to do things that they're not responsible for, but they're made responsible, like taking care of their siblings, doing extra stuff for the house that isn't their room, what it does is, if it can lead to a problem psychologically, because they learn that it basically leads to lack of self-care, because you grow up thinking that you have to do something for others more than for yourself. And those are the people, actually, that what they call them is parentified kids. Parentified kids, actually, grown-ups, when they've been parentified, when they grow up, they typically have a hard time with self-care. They typically feel really guilty of doing something nice for themselves, or caring for themselves. So I don't know if this is just sort of a reflection off of this theme of being helping, but just keep in mind that there is a line that you cross when you stop being responsible for yourself and being overly responsible for other people. We have here, I have never become responsible for things. As a child, I volunteered to help my mother navigate in county. Huh. Not sure what that means, but oh, country. Oh, okay. Oh, right. Navigate. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes the kids, and I think it's different if it's if you felt like voluntarily like you wanted to do it. And like I said, it's super complex. There's no way to for me to reflect accurately, because it's so variable. But yeah, I think I'm gonna move on, since we have to get through so much here. So, okay, so the last point here is, trauma is not defined by the event, but rather by the person's reaction and story they tell themselves as a result. Okay, this is one of the most important things to understand about trauma. You can have two people in an elevator in Mexico during an earthquake in the same proximity. One person can have developed PTSD as a result, and the other person can be like, yeah, it was awesome, I survived. And they were in exactly the same place, literally 2 feet away from each other in one contained space. And so what that says is that trauma is not an event. Trauma has nothing to do with the event. Trauma has to do with the person's ability to internalize that event and create a story, and come and box it, or put it in their mind in a way. And so just keep that in mind, that people can get traumatized by benign events, like being berated as a kid for dropping the milk. And that can cause really profound psychological problems. And in the other end of it is that you can have no trauma from really seemingly catastrophic events, like being sexually assaulted. People come out of sexual assault and feel more or less okay. So it's not, you can't, it is really not uniform. And it also speaks to the internal locus of control. It's like, in a lot of ways, a higher functioning adult does have the responsibility of how they internalize an event. And you can use the event, any event really, to create a story about it that will have an impact. I agree with the idea of being parentified to an extent, but there's a cultural component depending on collectivistic, individualistic culture. Yes, that's true. I wanted to share an upcoming Zoom webinar for adult children of immigrants who want to further explore boundaries and their mental health. Right. Cool. Thanks. So yeah, let's move on here. So that's trauma. So, and I'll go into more of the ownership of it, but it is defined by the event, not by the event, but the reaction. Um, okay. So what is anxiety? So this is a bit of an experiential. What I wanted to try to have you try to do is, oh, okay. So, um, so anxiety can be traced back to the German root word angst. That's where that word comes from. And angst is defined as the narrowing or choking of the breathing passageways. Okay, so that's what that word literally means. So as an experiential, try this with me. Close your eyes for a moment and tighten your throat and your stomach at the same time and hold it like that for 2 seconds. So just tighten your throat and your stomach and just squeeze. All right. So that's basically like what anxiety feels like. And I just wanted to invite you to do that so that you can kind of get a sense of what it is, because that's what's happening in your body when you're in a state of anxiety. Um, anx- Here's the thing: you can't really experience anxiety without you experiencing it in your body. Anxiety is not a kind of cloud of that doesn't exist somewhere. It actually is felt somewhere, and you can't be anxious. So what I do is sometimes I'll ask, somebody comes in, a client will come in, and they'll be like, I'm anxious. And then I'll ask them, I say, well, how do you know where do you feel that anxiety? And they're like, I don't know. And I said, well, how do you know you're anxious if you don't feel it anywhere? And then they're like, oh, okay. And then they say, okay, let's take a moment. So then you could take a moment to actually discover where that anxiety is, and you will find that it is somewhere. You'll find it somewhere. It'll be somewhere. It'll be in your stomach or in your shoulders. You'll find it actually is located somewhere. So becoming more of your breath and the tension in the body, once you can actually locate it, then you can start to dismantle. But it actually perpetuates itself when you're not aware. So it's kind of running on automatic. So it's kind of like as soon as you attend to it, it starts to relieve itself. And that's what mindfulness is really just attending to whatever is happening within you. So yeah, that's that. So we'll do something, hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes in the end. I'll do a quick body scan, and I'll show you how to actually do this experientially, about how to track into your body and do like a sweeping inventory of your body. Um, okay. All right. So I'm going to run through this. I have a lot to cover, and I'm noticing that we have a half hour left. So actually, I'm going to skip this. Okay, so I like this slide. It says a smooth sailor never made a skilled. I mean, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. Um, and it just really points to how, just to keep in mind that adversity is something that is um, creating and benefiting you if you can use it that way. Um, so one of my teachers, that he would always say that it's always up to you to nurture yourself with life. So like I always say, I tell my students this, so that, like, for instance, if I'm sitting with a client, if I'm bored, um, how do I know that they're boring me and not me boring myself? um and that's the existential question. It's kind of like, well, can I take responsibility for staying fascinated and nurturing myself with my perspective of the client? See, if I get judgmental, or if I get bored, or if I get disenchanted, that's really my own prerogative. I mean, who knows if they're making me do that? I don't think that they can, actually. And so with this kind of fascination, really, I can use any situation to nurture myself, and to stay fascinated. So that's that whole thing. So let's move on here. This will help, and I think this will kind of tie in some things that we were talking about earlier. Okay, so self-determination. Self-determination is, depending on which board your license is, or if you work with different mental health organizations, usually if you dig into the sort of ethical guidelines, self-determination is an essential principle in the helping profession. For MFTs, that's definitely there, and furthermore, you're not really allowed to give advice, for that matter. You're not supposed to give advice because that would dishonor a person's self-determination. So it's important to believe in the dignity and personhood of every being. That's what self-determination is all about. And just keep in mind, dignity is also in their ability to make mistakes and suffer the consequences. There's dignity in that too. Don't forget, I think sometimes people think dignity is about only the good things that they do. Dignity is also in them failing and then learning from that. So people are a lot more resilient than you think. People do overcome their challenges, and sometimes with this stance of self-determination, it's like, how can I be a facilitator? How can I be there for this person as they go through their own journey of hardship and resiliency? And working harder than the client robs their ability to exercise their strength. So this is super important for you guys. This is one of the, if anything you take away from this training, it's this. You can't work too hard, okay? Working too hard, not only does it make it harder for you to work because you get spent and burnt out, it actually does a disservice to your clients, because there's an energetic unbalance, because you start to kind of feed into their helplessness. So so you want to leave room for adversity for them. You want to leave room for them to overcome difficulties, and that's kind of the learning process. And keep in mind, people are still completing childhood processes that in their well into their 80s. You can have a 50-year-old that's still stuck in a 15-year-old process. And so some people, obviously homeless people, or even any person that comes in, they could still be dealing with a process, a developmental process, and may act like a child. And that's okay. And what we want to do is we want to let them learn in their own way. And that's why sometimes we become like heavenly parental figures that try to provide a much more reparative and healthy limit where you can be loving and say, well, you know what, I'm not available to fill out your paperwork. I can sit here and sit with you and support you if you have any questions, but I'm not going to do it myself. That's a healthy way to reparent them, because they will internalize you as, okay, this counselor is a healthy limit setter and a loving support, instead of doing their paperwork for them, for instance. So, and then people, yeah, keep in mind, people can be uncanny and surprisingly resourceful. Especially around here in the Bay Area, hipsters, people dress weird, and you could be at a party and somebody looks like a completely disheveled, and they're like some CEO of Google or something. Who knows? Don't keep in mind your bias. Even if they're homeless, you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what kind of skills they have. They may be very intelligent and surprisingly capable. So just keep that in mind. You're not the savior of the human race. You're just a collaborator. So kind of come back down to earth. Does any questions about this? I always get a lot of different comments about this and how difficult it is and wanting to help and people who are in dire situations. I've heard all sorts of comments, and sometimes there's a little bit of protest against this. And also keep in mind that your agency, may not like this because a lot of agencies have this like do whatever it takes component. So there's sometimes it's at odds with self-determination. Um, but I would say think for yourself, because there's a logic in this, and it's a really old wisdom of teaching a man, giving a man a fish versus teaching a man how to fish. You know, this is thousands of years old. This concept. Um, so that's that. All right, so let's move on. And this is this is one of my passions is of looking at kind of Eastern philosophy. Um, yeah, like I said, if you have any more questions, just I can always go back if you have something that was latent. So okay, so life occurs naturally in sequence with the beginning, middle, and end. And this is a little like Zen. I don't know what you call it, calligraphy or something. It's a spiral. So I teach this concept called allowance. It's one of my like passions. Basically, allowance is the opposite of resistance. Um, and allowance is the same thing as flow. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like a flow state. You know, when somebody's like dancing or playing basketball, they're like in this complete like static state. And that's what allowance is. And I believe allowance is sort of the ultimate way of being. It is the way that children play. It is sort of a very healthy way to be. And I'll explain what allowance is. So learning to allow life to unfold without fighting it or attempting to make it stay the same makes it much more smooth and flowing. Um, so this whole concept of impermanence that we like to be more pro-positive, like we like beautiful things, but like flowers and stuff, but you can't freeze a flower in its budding state. You know, you have to also allow for it to die and decay, and there's that process, and it's organic, and things break and people die, and you know things just are not going to stay the same. And so your ability to allow the experience for yourself within yourself is really makes it a lot better for you. And so that also means allowing your anxiety, allowing your mood. um, you know, a lot of people come in to my office and they say, oh, you know, crying is so exhausting, and being sad is so all the time is exhausting. Well, but the truth is it's not so much exhausting to be sad, it's exhausting to resist your sadness, because then the sadness is dragged out longer. And if you actually are sad and you just embrace your sadness, it actually will just kind of like cascade through you, and you will feel then the levels of relief and kind of a different state after it completes itself. Um, so yeah, we do not need to fix or change things right away. Um, you know, learning to validate our own feelings allows them to move through us instead of fighting them. You know, you know, it's kind of like validation, self-validate. It's kind of like what I talked about with compassion. It's the same thing with validation. You know, when you come to a friend and you say, "Oh, I feel so shitty, and I'm a horrible person," and then your friend says, "Well, no, you're not. You're awesome. Come on." And then you say, you're not listening to me, like, you know, that's, you know, you're just trying to talk me out of it. So that's invalidation. Well, we do that to ourselves too. You know, we intellectualize, we talk ourselves out of our problems, we do all sorts of things. And so what I'm inviting you to do is learn to sit with your feelings. And that's sort of this kind of Eastern mindfulness uh, um, way of addressing you know, mental health and feelings, is just feel okay. What can I just be with my sadness? What can I not judge it? Can I not group it as negative or positive? But can I just like allow it for a moment? And that's a much radically different experience than you probably have had. But I can assure you, try it, because it has actually much different results than resisting or intellectualizing it, or fighting them. Because what happens is, when you fight it, then you're kind of, again, you're going at odds with yourself, and trying to now, you know, have you know, negative feelings towards your sadness. So now not only do you have sadness, now you have anger for feeling sad, or shame for feeling sad, and so it gets kind of compounded. So that's the whole thing about allowance. And I have this little chart, so maybe you guys can ask questions to just see if it really works, if you understand it. Yeah, you'll get a copy. I sent this chart. Okay, so check this out. So this is what my teacher, Don Hadlock, he created this something called the universal flow perspective. And so basically, if you think about, see how this chart here, so here you have, okay, so down here, the flow of feelings, imagine that this is you, right? This is your body right here. And then life is all the unfolding events. This is life. So what happens is, start with life goes and flows into you. And here you have this opportunity to either push away life, like a feeling or a situation or a memory or whatever. And so what happens here is that this is the first level of resistance, which is here. And so you can say, okay, I'm not going to feel this. And that's where you feel that resistance. And so that resistance is actually, disease. It's like tension, anxiety, all these depression. And so by pushing it away. And so here you have the opportunity to allow right here at the first X. And then if you allow, then the feelings flow this way. And then here's the second point of resistance, which is the clinging, which is like, oh, I won't let this go. This person messed me up, or grief or whatever, or somebody died 10 years ago, whatever. And so that's the second point of resistance, which is clinging. Okay. And it's clinging is kind of like pushing away, but it's holding on. And they're the same type of feeling in the body, but it's a different way of doing it. And so here you have another opportunity to allow, and then it can leave. And so technically, to be in a state of flow and allowance, you have to be a hollow. You have to allow life to move in through you, feeling it, and then letting it go. And so you have the combination, you can either push life away or hold on to life, or together. You could be totally clogged up inside and really feel a lot of tension and resistance because you're not allowing feelings through you. And going back to the somatic component is that a lot of clients that I've talked to, they'll come in and they'll have some very immediate symptoms in the digestive system. So, for instance, anger can sometimes show up as heartburn or indigestion or diarrhea. And if you think about it, this hollow tube of emotion can be very looked at as very similar to the digestive system. So if you're not passing fluid, if you're not going to the bathroom and you're like somehow clogged up, that's the same thing. So you want to be in a state of allowance, emotionally, but also physiologically too, on all levels, really. You're meant to, your body and mind and everything is meant to be in a state of flow. You're not meant to be clogged up. Your blood, your heart, your arteries, your bladder, your stomach, your emotions, everything is meant to be in a state of flow. And this is also, not to get too philosophical, but this is the way that rivers work. If you look at a pond that's stagnant, there's no flow, it gets dirty, it gets infested, there's all sorts of bugs and stuff. But if you go up to a creek where the water is flowing, it's crystal clean. And so life, you are made of water. And you are life. You come out of the earth. You are an organic process, and so you are not so separate from that flow system. So you want to be in flow, just like nature is. And that is clean. That is the cleanest way to be. That's why crying is so good, because crying is literally, feelings moving through you. Does that make sense? And yeah, great. I like that you guys dig it. And I know that this can be a bit contradictory. I grew up, obviously I went through grad school at JFK. There can be a lot of contradictory information because a lot of times we're talking about coping skills and trying to, I don't know, like kind of get by and stuff like that, and to cope with your feelings. And this can be a little bit contradictory to that. This can be a little bit like, well, I was taught to, like, read a book, or to get by and not to, to kind of cope with my feelings. And it's a little bit of a different approach to that. And I'm not saying you should give up on coping skills, but it, just consider it. I think it's a different perspective. The thing is, the problem with coping skills is that if it's seen as a pejorative, like, oh, I'm coping, I'm coping with something negative, it's almost like, oh, I have to, like, it's kind of like, I have to tolerate something, and it's something negative about it, and so but this is more of the wellness perspective of, like, yeah, it's all is well, I'm going to be okay with my feelings, I'm going to let them through me. All right, so I'm noticing we're running out of time. So let me. This is a cool quote. Every time I judge someone else, I reveal an unhealed part of myself. Um, this is a cool quote by Don Miguel Ruiz. He's like a kind of a Latin American guru. So yeah, just this fact that, like, if you're triggered by somebody, it's kind of going back to what I said earlier about trauma. If you're triggered by somebody, ask yourself what it is that about me. Or if somebody's walking down the street when they have like a silly hat and you're bothered by it, you might want to consider why is it worth mentioning to you? What's it to you, type of thing. So okay. Okay, I'm just gonna pile through this. We only have about 10 minutes. We can go over a little bit, right?
We're fine
Ellie?
with that. Yeah, folks might need to jump off, but we can keep the Zoom going for sure.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So, okay, so allowance, that's that. Now, here's the thing. Allowance doesn't mean that you have to put up with injustices or things that are not okay with you. Allowance is allowance of your feelings. It doesn't mean that allowance of somebody being beaten on the street. You know, that doesn't mean that you don't take action or participate or not participate in things. So don't confuse the two. So knowing your boundaries. Healthy boundaries are essential in caring for yourself and not building resentment towards others. When you don't know your own limits and boundaries, we end up doing things that we don't enjoy and resent ourselves and others for it. So, so like, for instance, if you go along with something, like if somebody asks you to do something like move a couch, and you're not capable of it, and you have bad back, but you do it anyways because you want to preserve the friendship or something like that, you may tell yourself, oh, well, they owe me, or secretly you believe that. And then when you ask them for help and then they say, oh, I'm not available, then you blow up on them and you say, you never do anything for me. But really, it's just that you created a story that they owed you. And that's how we generate resentment, because resentment comes from having hidden expectations, or I expected you. Or for instance, let's say me and Eli were buddies at work, and every day we would go out for coffee, never agreed to it, but we would just naturally go out for coffee. And then all of a sudden I started going out for coffee with Monica instead. And all of a sudden Eli is like, oh, you abandoned me. And because she had the story that I was supposed to go with her every week, so a lot of times the resentment and hurt we create has nothing to do with the person. It has to do with our expectations. And so the more that we can clear up and clean up our boundaries and be open about, no, I'm not available for this, will really clean, it will actually reduce the amount of conflict, because it's just, it takes a little bit of practice. And we say you don't have a good yes unless you have a good no. And so I usually do this experiential. We don't have any time for it, but I usually do this experiential where one person reaches out their hand and the other person says, they say, can I hold your hand? And the other person says, no, I'm not available. And we study on both ends mindfully what shows up for you. Like, do you feel, what is it like to reject somebody? What is it like to be rejected? Unfortunately, we don't have time for that. But what I do want to invite you at least is be aware of your boundaries and what you're available for, what you're not available for, what's in your body. Are you hungry? Are you fatigued? Are you available to go out with somebody, or you're not available to go out with somebody? Um, and See if you can practice very clear language of like, no, I'm not available. And also, what another thing I have to point out is, um, don't apologize prematurely. Don't be one of these people that says, oh sorry about that, sorry. You know, don't say sorry unless you feel remorse earnestly. um if you're not available, you're not available. You don't need to apologize for it. And also, you don't always have to explain why. Some things are confidential. You may have a doctor's appointment that you don't need to tell anybody about. They don't need to know your medical condition, or something with your children. You don't have to explain why. You don't need to say sorry, and you don't need to say why. You could just say, you know what, I'm not available right now. And that's okay. And I think we need to understand that. Are all expectations unhealthy, or are there some healthy expectations, like I expect my children to be respectful? Um, I don't think expectations are healthy at all, and I'll tell you why. When you expect something, you victimize yourself. Like, for instance, if you say there shouldn't be bad people in this world, and then when there are bad people in the world, you're like, damn it, why are there bad people in the world? I expected them not to be. But if you say, you know what, I expect there will be bad people in this world, and I'm gonna live, I'm gonna make sure that I not associate with them or find a way to take care of myself, but I understand that they will be them. Then you're like, then you're not hurt, you're not a victim. But the more that you expect somebody to do something, you become a victim of them not participating in that. So um, what I try to do is I try to invite people to be more self-focused instead of having expectations. Uh, So for instance, what a healthy boundary looks like is that, how do you know a healthy boundary from an unhealthy boundary? Is that a healthy boundary, you do not need the other person to participate in it, in fulfilling it. So for instance, let's say if I'm just going to use Eli again just because I just need a name. So let's say me and Eli are in a relationship, and Eli drinks alcohol, and I don't like that. So this is the first part, is like, I'm going to show you what an unhealthy boundary is. Eli, I really hate that you drink. I need you to stop drinking. When you drink, you act out, you say things you regret, and really, I'm just sick of it. Stop drinking. I can't handle it anymore. Okay, that's typically what people think a boundary is. That's not a boundary. Okay, that's just a request, a complaint, whatever you want to call it. Let me demonstrate for you what a real boundary is, a solid boundary. Hey, Eli, you know what? You can drink. I don't want to tell you how to live your life. I respect that. You can drink as much as you want, and that's totally cool with me. But just so you know, in order to take care of myself, I'm not going to be available to hang out if you're drinking. Okay? That's just something that I need to do for myself, because I need to take care of myself. And if we're ever out and we're getting, eating at a restaurant or something, and if you order a drink, I'm probably going to take a cab home. Okay? So I'm just letting you know. And actually, I don't even need to let you know. Me letting you know is just the icing on the cake. This is the limit is within myself. I need to set within myself that I'm not going to be around you when you drink. And I don't even need to tell you. I could just do it. I could just not be around when you're drinking. So a real limit, you don't need the other person to participate in it. If you did, then you wouldn't be a limit, because you would be dependent on them participating in your limit. And so expectations, it's fine to have expectations, but if you're victimized by by other people not fulfilling your expectations, then you're at a loss. So if your children are disrespectful, you need to set a limit. Like, I'm not available to talk with you if you're using vulgar language. I'll be happy to talk with you when you're ready to talk respectfully. Or those who exhibit vulgar language don't get ice cream. So you have to set limits around that. You can't just have expectations and hope for the best. That doesn't work. It never works with people. It doesn't work with civil rights. It doesn't work with any component of human nature. Expectations are just requests. Does that make sense? All right. So, um, I think I've talked too much because we've run out of time. But just to kind of put the tail on its end, just so you know, boundaries are an essential aspect of burnout and secondary trauma. Self-determination, allowing self-determination for your clients, and having good boundaries with the things that you're not available for with your clients and with your colleagues is really like 75% of the gig, or at least 50% of the gig. And the other part is, of course, self-care, being body oriented, being mindful. But boundaries is a big part because we do get sucked into stuff that really burns us out. I like this quote too. It says, "I lied. I said I was busy. I was busy, but not in the way that most people understand. I was busy taking breaths. I was busy taking deeper breaths. I was busy silencing my irrational thoughts. I was busy calming a racing heart. I was busy telling myself I'm okay. Sometimes this is my busy and I will not apologize for it." Okay. It says here, I really like what you said about boundaries, and that's it's okay to say no. Yeah. Peace. It does not mean to be where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be in a calm in your heart. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and so yeah, this quote is really just about giving yourself the spaciousness and being available towards yourself, to take the time and not be caught up in this rat race of having to do this, all these things for people and this and that. Just really kind of connecting to yourself and getting dialed in and being well within yourself first. Um, and that doesn't mean self-care like taking selfies and doing pedicures, like really like earnest, wellness, mindfulness. So actually there's more that I need to cover, but it's 11 o'clock, so I don't know what you guys want to do. I feel bad. I think there was a little bit in the beginning where we took too much time. Should I go on a little bit more? Or how do
If
you
you're available
mostly?
for that, I think that would be great. And anybody who's able to stick around, that would be awesome. And I do want to acknowledge we had a suggestion that this would be great to have a follow-up training on. So we'll definitely take that suggestion and take it back to the Office of Supportive Housing. But yeah, anybody who can stick around for a little bit, Dimitri, if you're willing to continue, and those of you who have
Yeah.
to jump off, we understand, and we hope to see you again.
Okay, sweet. I'll just go for a little, like 5 or 10 minutes, and you guys can go. Um, all right. So, ownership of feelings. This is another component part of it is, so okay, so it's natural to have feelings or reactions to life. Sometimes we can look for opportunities to change how we respond to people and circumstances. Okay, so with this one, usually in person, what I do is like I throw an object onto the floor, like my keys or something, and then I go around and ask people what is your reaction, and some people will say I got startled. Another person will say I got scared. Another person laughs. Another person will try to pick up the keys and hand them to me because they're trying to, help me. And so, and then I point out that how many different reactions are there to that one neutral event of me just throwing the keys. And so what that points is that all events are neutral, and your reaction is your reaction. You have to own that. And so, um, so here the next line is, if we experience anger or sadness, we have to be careful not to necessarily blame or attribute the action of the other person or the situation as the cause of those feelings. So, and this is a gross example, but I always bring this up: domestic violence. Okay, you have a woman that comes home from shopping, and the man is angry because she spent too much money. He punches a hole in the wall. Cops are called. They ask the guy, "Why did you do it?" He would say, "She made me do it. She drove me to do it." And that's really kind of it in a nutshell. Um, so disowning your reaction, and saying that the world did it. They made me do it. My kids drove me. My kids drove me to beat them. My kids drove me to yell, or my wife, or my partner, or this or that, or the guy. So it's about taking responsibility of like, yes, I'm getting myself angry right now. I'm getting myself frustrated. I'm doing it, not the outside, not the external. Um, um, and what feelings are you choosing to stay in? Ownership and responsibility is liberating and freeing and gives you more control. It's hard at first because you're like, oh crap, I have to take responsibility for this feeling. Yes, it's hard at first, but then you realize that you also, if you can get yourself angry, you can also get yourself in a state of joy too. You realize that there's a lot more versatility with ownership, because if you're the one that's doing it, then you have all these other things you can do. But if it's the outside doing it, then you're dependent. You're kind of a slave of the circumstance, because if things are getting you angry, then they will always get you angry, and so you have to either get rid of that external circumstance or always be triggered by it. And so ownership gives you more liberty and control over your situation. Thank you. So start by identifying what you are feeling and how you're reacting to the moment. And that's introspection for you, okay? Ownership is a hard one. I think a lot of people object to this idea when I do these trainings, and it's always a point of conversation, of course, with difficulties like people being violent towards you. If somebody's punching you in the face, you're going to have a reaction. I'm not saying that. But I think there's still room in subtlety with regards to adversity and how you are choosing to react. Because a lot of times we're ticked off by people who are really not doing anything really overtly malicious. Somebody picking their nose or chewing loudly or something like that. So we still got to take a look at that. Okay, and let's just do this experiential, and then we'll kind of, I think we're pretty much done after that. What I try to do is this is helpful for you with sitting with your clients. So if you take your arms out like this with me, and have them out like straight out, you will notice that this is the stance of being overextending yourself, being too available, and being this is like the passive stance. Basically, when you're sitting with your clients, this is when you like really you want to help them really in a way that's dire. If you notice, if you do this long enough, your arms will get tired, and that's actually a metaphor for how tired you get when you're overextending yourself with your clients. Okay, and you can also notice that you'll probably be sitting forward too much when you're sitting with them, and also mentally you'll just be like engaging, you'll be trying too hard. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, don't do that. Okay, and the other one, the second one, is you want to put your both hands here, and this is the aggressive stance. This is where you're like you're kind of checked out. You're not really available towards them, and how that shows up in the room is that you may be kind of like, not your body's kind of away from them. You're maybe a little bit reserved. You don't want to give your all. That also doesn't work because you're not really. It's the opposite. We talked about that, like not being compassionate enough, not being loving enough. And so what the ultimate state is, the assertive state is one hand here and one hand out. Okay, this is the energetic template for how you want to be with your clients. You want to be connected to yourself. You want to be attentive, balanced. You want to be fed. You want to have good health, hydrated. You're well. And from this place, I'm available to you. I'm available to help because I'm connected to myself, and I'm energetically balanced. I'm not a shoe salesman. I don't need you to do anything. I'm not trying to get you to buy into anything. I am available to help from a place of center. And so what I invite you guys to do is keep this in mind. You don't have to use your hands because it's going to look kind of silly, but use it as a sort of an energetic template to how do you want to balance yourself? How do you want to sit with people when you're helping them? Are you overextending yourself? Are you kind of reserved or protectionist attitude? Or are you in this kind of place of balance where you're connected to yourself and available to them? That's where I want you to be. And that's the optimal state of the helping profession. Um, so that's pretty much it. Have positive intentions, do things that recharge you. And my state, the way to keep yourself well is to stay body oriented. So the benefits of being body oriented is that because thoughts are subject to distortion, they can be misleading. If you rely on just only your cognitive faculties, you also want to use your senses, because your gut and all the other faculties within you. Because assumptions can be damaging. Our bodies tell us the truth and keep the score with our memories. So you want to be connected to your body, more wisdom. Develop an immediate felt sense in your body, and that's what the meditation and the body scan does. It develops those faculties within you to be more sense oriented and more aware of what's going on inside, and so you can find your own peace independent from the external environment. It's kind of like somebody said over here, by being peaceful even in the midst of adverse circumstances. So dance, yoga, getting massage, things like that. Do more of that for yourself. Be quiet and patient. Let evil and unpleasantness pass quietly over you. Do not try to avoid them. Observe them carefully. Let active understanding take the place of reflex irritation, and you will grow out of your trouble. Kafka. And that's it. Deep breath.
Thank you so much, Dimitri, and thank you so much for going a little bit over. We've gotten a lot of feedback as people have been leaving, just thanking you so much. This is a super great training, and also a couple comments that a follow-up would be great. So we'll definitely take that back and let you know if we are able to do some sort of follow-up. We're also definitely hoping to be able to include this in our regular round of training. So we'll definitely, you'll see this in the rotation again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally available. And actually, sometimes I do it for 2 hours. That may be a good thing to do too, because that leaves room for doesn't get engaged sometimes, and people ask questions, and that kind of takes up more time. So 2 hours would probably be much better. But I'm totally available, so let's do it again.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much, participants. Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you, Monica and Nicole, for helping facilitate. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, a good weekend, and we hope to see you and hear from you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.